so much, Professor Lila Berkesh. Good morning, everyone, dear colleagues, dear students. I'm so happy to be here today. It is always a pleasure to visit Budapest, especially in spring. It is better, yes. My presentation today is about the limits of amending Romanian Constitution in relation to European Union legal order. In fact, in the project, I submitted an article concerning the amendment of the Member States' Constitution in relation to the European Union legal order and constitutional identity. In that article, I examined this issue of limits of the revision of the Constitution and their dynamics in the context of European Union developments. These values, the core identities of the Constitution, the cornerstone of the constitutions, are mentioned in some constitutions as revision limits, or their implicit existence is established through interpretation by the constitutional courts. I started from the idea that in itself, this accession to the European Union is based on the presumption of the coherence of the system of fundamental values, namely on the idea that the acts of accession to the European Union and then the amendment of the founding treaties are in accordance with the explicit or implicit limits laid down in the Constitution. It is a presumption, but we know very well that there are some constitutional courts, like German constitutional courts, Czech constitutional courts. They have this opportunity to review the treaty, for example, the Treaty of Lisbon. But in Romania, the Constitutional Court was not noticed in this regard, so even the Constitutional Court of Romania has this power, according to the Constitution, to review the international treaties before ratification. But our Constitutional Court was not notified by the authorities in order to check this conformity. So that's why I discuss about this presumption. In the same time, after joining the European Union, member states agreed that based on the principle of loyal cooperation, they shall take any appropriate measures, general or particular, to ensure fulfillment of the obligation arising of the treaties or resulting from the acts of institution of the Union, and facilitate the achievement of the Union's task and refrain from any measure which could jeopardize the attainment of the Union objectives. As a consequence, once passed through this, let's say, constitutional filter, explicit or implicit, this core of the Constitution of the 27 member states, the legal order established by the European Union treaties itself became kind of filter for these constitutional orders. So the questions in that research are as follows. This obligation assumed by the member state established a new limit to the revision of the member state constitutions. What would these limits consist, and how does it interfere or integrate into the national constitutionalism? Are we still talking about a rigid cornerstone of the member state constitution, or a flexible one, influenced by the definition that the common values of European Union acquired at various times? In fact, this is the question for today, this one. And the last question, does the European Court of Justice have this exclusive right to define the common values? Where is this evolution leading us, and what does constitutional identity usually attach and explain in relation to this nucleus, this cornerstone of the Constitution, mean in this context? So, starting from this research, during today's conference, I'll develop a section of this article, and I'll discuss about Romania's experience in order to open debates related to the similar experience, if we have similar experiences, in other member states. I chose the Romanian example not only because it's my country and I know very well the case law of the constitutional courts. I For example, I drafted myself as an assistant magistrate in the cases, some of the decisions of the Constitutional Court on the amendment of the Constitution. But because I think that is an interesting example and in terms of this dynamic, because there is an interesting transformation in terms of the overall theme of the coexistence and future of the European Union that could demonstrate that this cornerstone of the Romanian Constitution is adaptable and influenced by the European law, but in a broad sense, not only European Union, but also the Council of Europe. First, some theoretical points, the limits of the revision of the Romanian Constitution and the competence of the Constitutional Court. We have expressly provided the procedure for the revision of the Constitution and the limits of the revision Constitution in the special section of the Romanian Constitution. The initiative of the revision belongs to the President of Romania, the proposal of the government, at least of the quarter of the number of deputies or senator, at least 500,000 citizens with the right to vote. Also, as in terms of the procedure, the draft of proposal of the revision must be adopted by the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate, and the revision shall be final after the approval by the referendum within 30 days of the date of passing in Parliament this revision law. The revision law of the Constitution enters into force on the date of publication of Constitutional Court decision confirming the returns of the referendum. Within this procedure, the Constitutional Court plays a key role, exercises the constitutional review of the initiative to revise the Constitution. So we have the initiative, and after that, the review of the Constitutional Court. After that, the procedure in the Parliament. After that, again, the revision of the Constitutional Court of the law passed by the Parliament. And finally, the court intervened in the procedure of the referendum because the Constitutional Court confirmed that the result of the return of the referendum. Which are the limits of the revision of the Romanian Constitution? There are three types of limits. Material limits, meaning the national, independent, unitary, indivisible character of the state, the republican form of government, territorial integrity, independence of justice, political pluralism, official language. Teleological limits, meaning the result of the procedure that is not desirable, let's say, it's a definition in the doctrine of the constitutional law. No revision shall be made if it results in the suppression of the citizens' fundamental rights and freedoms or of the safeguard thereof. And some limits concerning exceptional situation. The Constitution shall not be revised during a state of siege or emergency or in the wartime. It is interesting that kind of recently, in 2021, the Constitutional Court qualified these limits of the review of the Constitution as belonging to the national constitutional identity, the fundamental identity core of the Romanian Constitution. So I think that as a result, the ruling of the Constitutional Court on the respect of these limits of the revision of the Constitution means implicitly the ruling on the respect of the identity core of the Romanian Constitution. So now I'll focus on the case law of the Romanian Constitutional Court in order to show that dynamics of the included in the core of the Constitution. In Romania, let's say 33 years since the adoption of the Constitution, there were 10 initiatives to revise the Constitution promoted, and only one was finished in 2003 in order to prepare the accession to the European Union. So only one was successful, past all these stages. Now, I found two stages, let's say, in this interpretation of the limits of the revision of the Constitution. In the first stage, I found the incorporation of the general principles outlined in the Article 1 of the Constitution. Article 1 of the Constitution provides general principles. characterize the Romanian state. In this Article 1 of the Constitution, it is enshrined also the principle of rule of law, which is important in terms of my research concerning the relationship with the Article 2 of the Treaties of European Union and the idea and the values, the common value of rule of law. Also in this first stage, I found reference not only to the Article 1 of the Constitution, but also to the international treaties on human rights that Romania is a party to, as provided by Article 20 of the Constitution. And we have here some fragments from this decision of the Constitutional Court in 2011 concerning this kind of approach of the limits of the revision of the Constitution. And my conclusion was that it seems that the identity core itself became a kind of block of constitutionality, incorporating in the first stage the general principles that underpin the organization of the Romanian state, and also the international treaties of human rights to which Romania is a party. The question is, there were consequences in this regard? Yes, I found it, for example, in another decisions on the revision of the Constitution in 2014. The Constitutional Court interpreted these values and in fact, all the amendment through the lens also of the Convention of Human Rights and other international treaties. For example, the Constitutional Court recommended that the Romanian fundamental law to use a legal language identical to that of the European Convention of Human Rights. Also, the Constitutional Court recommended in the same decision in 2014 the removal of the proposal amendment of one article of the Constitution concerning protection of children and young people with reference to the concepts and definition contained in the Declaration of the Rights of the Child. Second stage, the most recent decision of the courts pronounced in 2019 provide an interesting nuance towards the application of European Union law in controlling initiative to revise the Constitution. It is important to know that because it's about the Charter of European Union, which is also an act providing guarantees for human rights. But according to our Constitution, the logic and the relationship between the European Union law, meaning also Charter, is provided by a separate article 148, not that one, 20, concerning the treaties in general. We have a special article for European Union law, and that's why Constitutional Court said Charter, even it's about human rights, it will be interpreted in accordance with that specific article. So it's subject to these special rules, which prioritize the application of European Union law in case of conflict with internal law. In that more recent decision in 2019, Constitutional Court of Romania examined the initiative to amend the Constitution intended to forbid, for example, the President of Romania to grant pardons for corruption crimes. On this occasion, Constitutional Court specified more clearly the way in which it proceeds to disanalyze the limits of the review of the constitutional amendment. So you see the analysis in relation to the general principles, and after that the analysis in relation to an applicable fundamental rights or freedoms. And after that, starting from the premise that the fundamental rights and freedoms of the citizen, their guarantees cannot be considered a diffuse set of elements with any connection between them, but make up a coherent and unitary system of values based on human dignity, put this concept, human dignity, in the center of the reasoning. But human dignity is provided in the Romanian Constitution in Article 1 of the Constitution, not in these core values. The court concluded that any violation of the named fundamental rights and freedoms, which is in the core of the Constitution, represents a violation of the human dignity, which is in Article 1. And the Constitutional Court explained that the value of human dignity relates in relation also with the practice of European Court of Human Rights, but something new also with the practice of European Court of Justice. As you see, I put there to be more visible that this reasoning concerning the case law of European Court of Justice is in a kind of obiter dictum reasoning, but still it is mentioned and used in the reasoning of the Constitutional Court. So, according to the court, taking into account that on the one hand, the Article 1, paragraph 3 of the Constitution, which qualifies human dignity as the supreme value of Romanian state, and the other hand, the Article 20 concerning the human rights, and also this Article 148, which provides the relationship between the national legal order, the European Union legal order, the court decided that the general ban and granting individual pardons regarding corruption crimes has the effect of denying the vocation of persons who have committed such crimes to benefit from individual pardons. Such a legal treatment, regardless of its normative level, disregards the human existence of the individual, placing from a human point of view the person who have committed corruption offenses in a situation of inferiority, which constitutes a limitation of their dignity human. So the court finds that this kind of amendment is against the limits of the revision of the Constitution. But remember, it's not a specific limit in Article 152, this human dignity, but it's in Article 1, and also it was interpreted in accordance with European Court of Human Rights case law and European Court of Justice case law. So the question is, we can discuss about an interference of Article 2 of the Treaty, Identity of European Union, and Article 152, the limits of the revision of the Romanian Constitution in terms of fundamental rights. It looks that, according to this interpretation, the Charter and the European Court of Justice case law seem to be attached to the core of the Romanian Constitution. That's why I identified somehow this interpretation as the second stage of building of the block of constitutionality around the Article 152 in that part concerning the human rights. In 2 minutes, I'll discuss about challenges, some specific challenges, and after that, I'll pass to the conclusion to respect the time of my intervention. I think that following the case law of the Constitutional Court is uncertain in this moment how this component of fundamental rights will be interpreted given the problematic standards of these rights in terms of European Court of Human Rights, European Court of Justice, because it's a dynamic in itself at that level, this interplay between that two courts at the level of Europe. And also in the case of the Constitutional Court of Romania, the standard seems to have variation because in some decisions, the Constitutional Court strictly applies the constitutional text, according to which no revision shall be made if result in a suppression of the citizens' fundamental rights. This is the key word, suppression. While in another decision, the court argued for an upward protection of the fundamental rights. For example, it can be identified a strict interpretation in the decision by which the court found the constitutionality of the initiative to revise Article 48 of the Constitution in the sense of changing the phrase between spouses, referring to marriage, with the phrase between a man and a woman. The court used textual interpretation and that teleological interpretation, and decided that this kind of amendment of the Romanian Constitution respect the limits of the Constitution. But in other decisions, the Constitutional Court seemed to put equal between suppression and impairment of the fundamental rights, expressly stating that the revision of the Constitution can only be in the sense of raising the standards of protection of fundamental rights, so-called in the doctrine, that living tree doctrine, to raise the standards all the time, to raise the standards. Even you'll not suppress the rights, but you have to raise the standards of rights. So, conclusions, but in fact there is an invitation for debates. The interpretation by the Romanian Constitutional Court is continuously shaping these limits of the Constitution's revision. In the same way as referring to human dignity, which is a general principle enshrined in Article 1 of the Constitution, the gate is open to the valorization of other principles, such as the rule of law, also enshrined in Article 1 of the Romanian Constitution, but which has a unique status between the identity values of European Union law and its own imposition mechanism. That mechanism practically makes its definition difficult to comprehend in a way other than European Union terms. So I think that the overlap of these values, qualified as cornerstone or identity, creates a continuous plasticity of identities that are constantly reconfigured, developing somehow together. So the key of the development seems to be related to the interpretation of those values, as well as the delimitation of those that remain, if they remain, exclusively national. Thank you so much for your attention.